I deeply miss him. When you have a friendship like that, it's very hard not to. But I feel convicted in that we're healthier on our own journeys.
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Elena Mnayarji. Elena is here to share her divorce story. She's currently wrapping up her MBA program at UC Berkeley after having previously worked in the mental health tech space. She's translating her lived experience through divorce and her passion for business and well-being into what comes next. Let's get into Elena's story. Elena, welcome to The Details.
Thank you so much, Allison. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And we actually just met like a week ago. And so I'm so grateful for you to be here. And thank you for being willing to share your story.
Yes.
So let's dive in. Can you tell us the story of your divorce?
Yeah. I grew up in Middle America, Indiana. I met my ex when I was in middle school. We were 10 and 11. And I had an intuition early on. And of course, sometimes that can be like childhood crush. But it was like itching at me for a handful of years until I was 17. We started dating senior year of high school, went to different colleges, rival schools in Indiana, and really had this like pretty classic high school sweetheart love story. And in a lot of ways, I'm abundantly thankful to have that in these really formative years of my life. When we graduated, life kind of hit us hard. He was diagnosed with an autoimmune, and we were hit with grief and mental health struggles on both of our sides. And it was tough in a lot of ways because we didn't have this foundation of a relationship with ourselves. We had our relationship. That was sort of our main regulator for each other. And so looking back now, I think I see where we really struggled to weather those storms that life gave us. And we dated from 17 to 25. We were engaged for 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. We got married September of 2023. And then after marriage is when both of us really started to struggle and came to the decision that we were better apart just 8 months later, May 2024. So I was divorced by 28.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And what strikes me is just that you spent almost definitely over half your life with this person.
Yeah.
And in a romantic relationship for a very large part of it. But the marriage itself, as you said, was relatively short.
Yeah, definitely. I reflect now how it's almost been 20 years since I met him.
Wow.
I feel 20 years old. So, yeah.
So let's go back to some of those early years. How did your family of origin and childhood upbringing shape some of this story for you, given that you met so young?
Yeah. So my parents are actually from the Middle East, and my mom is Palestinian, my dad is Syrian. They immigrated to the States when they were both like in their early 20s. So I grew up in a bicultural, bilingual home, spoke Arabic with them, English at school. Definitely had a Middle Eastern community of friends and like family friends, but at school in Indiana, it was primarily American culture. And so when I brought an American boy in high school home, there was like a lot of trepidation, of course. My parents are very progressive and accepting of all cultures, but there is hesitation when it comes to dating outside of the culture. What's typical is that you'd meet someone in your mid 20s, their families would know each other, like ideally you're from the same culture, and then your parents could like sleep well at night. And I brought my ex around pretty early on to where he integrated super well within the culture. And, it was really harmonious and beautiful throughout that integration and, our families getting to know each other and the cultures and that kind of thing. But I will say subconsciously, I think I learned heteronormative roles and kind of the blueprint for a man and a woman's role. And the way that I interpreted it, at least, was that a woman will sometimes tend to lose herself in a relationship, and that's just okay. Like, that's just par for the course. Whether it's she stops taking care of herself, she stops doing things that she loves. And even the taking care of yourself part is like kind of funny because in Middle Eastern culture, a woman's value is very heavy on her appearance and her image. So it was like she could be taking care of herself for others' perceptions of her, not really for herself, because like why? Or really in her relationship. And even what she loved to do, like it would be put on the back burner for kids. And I just saw my mom. I have so much respect for my parents, but, and she would even say, started to lose herself, as so many people do in motherhood and in marriage. But I think now we have this language and this conversation that helps folks do less of that. So I think in the beginning of my ex and I's relationship, the first 5-6 years, it was pretty like blissful. We were both in college. We had this scaffolding of like a life that was set out for us. Even we were in different schools. And so when we got together, it was like exciting and fun. And then when we'd go to our respective schools, I really enjoyed that because I could build myself and build my life. I didn't even realize that why I liked that so much. And it was because I needed that time and I needed more of that time. So as we got out of undergrad and the scaffolding of life really fell away, of college and adulthood really hit us hard, losing people, diagnoses, mental health struggles that people face within decades of being together, we were hit with in the first couple of years out of school. I sort of just thought it was normal to fall into that caregiver role. And it was definitely subconscious, asking about doctor's appointments and the last time he had done this and the last time he had checked on this. And I think a lot of women as well are constantly forward looking. And I just started to take on that mental load and started listening to more conversations about what the mental load was. So I think that's when cracks started to show in the relationship. And there became more of a deficit.
Did those cracks start to form before you were married, or did you really start to notice those more after the marriage?
Yeah, definitely before we were married. So when we were engaged, I remember I had a minute where I was growing deeper in my relationship with myself. So through yoga, spirituality, I was just wanting more meaning and wanting more inner peace. And I remember feeling like our conversations were still kind of at that surface level that they were when we were kids. And I wanted more, and I kept trying to dig for more. And I think you really can only meet someone as far and as deep as they've met themselves. And I was really trying to force that with him, which I realized later on is just not fair to ask of someone. But it was around when we got engaged. I remember having sort of a breakdown and talking to him about it. And then when I saw his reaction to potentially us ending and it being sort of this, like, I could just see like his world falling apart, there was a voice in my head that I had heard from childhood that was sort of just like, Elena, you're overthinking this. You can never decide on anything. You're asking for too much. And I think seeing his reaction also kind of made me feel like nobody will ever love you this much. Do you see how hard this is, how painful this would be? And I think when you start dating when you're so young, it's all you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It sounds like there's this real tension between this deep and long love that you had in your life and the sense of choosing yourself as well and seeing the growth that you were experiencing and the growth that you wanted for yourself. Did it feel like you were choosing between yourself and the relationship?
100%. It was either abandon myself or abandon him or continue doing that. And you don't really realize you're self abandoning in the moment. I think being a martyr feels good. At least it felt good for me. It felt like I was being a good person. And this concept of good and bad, I grew up within the Christian world, but it translated to so many things. And once you throw that out the window, I think is where real truth and liberation comes.
Beautifully said. Can you walk us through some of the emotions you were experiencing? And maybe also, as well, if you're willing to share some of the body sensations. You do a lot of yoga work and somatic work. And if I remember from our earlier conversations, you talked about how sometimes your body knew before maybe your head or your heart did. But maybe walk us through, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you experiencing during these times?
Yeah. So we had been in couples therapy for a couple years before we called it. I think during those years before there was sort of the nail in the coffin, it was sort of a waiting. It was an excruciating waiting, hoping that we were going to change as a unit. But both of us were deeply entrenched in our patterns. And I think of a relationship as two people in a boat, and life will poke holes in the bottom of your boat. And how well you repair those holes or don't determines whether or not you sink. I also see two people in a relationship are two bodies and they come together and there's one unit, but that unit is like a living and breathing thing. People don't really realize that unit and that being can have scars on it, and it can only withstand so much. I remember in couples therapy, one session asking our couples therapist to just tell us what to do. Is this salvageable? Should we stay together or should we like really not, in your clinical opinion? She was like, I can't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
She was like, people stay together through lots of things.
Yeah.
Whether or not they should for their well being is a different story. But if you want a healthy relationship, you need the willingness to change. And I think there just comes a point when you are all out of gas. And actually, the strongest thing that you can do is to no longer work or fight the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm forgetting your initial question.
It's okay. No, I think that really resonates in the sense of so many people that I've spoken with. It's rarely one specific moment or thing. I mean, sometimes it is, right? There are some stories for sure where there is one moment and from that point on, people cannot move on. But there are so many stories like this one where it's those small little scratches and wounds. And as you said, that develops the scar tissue over time. And you get to the point of the body, that body of one that you talked about just can't sustain any more hurt or pain.
Yeah.
Or as that therapist said, you could choose to sustain it, but is that really what's best for each individual? So I think that really resonates.
Yeah, I'm remembering you asked about kind of those body sensations. And I have been doing yoga therapy since I was a sophomore in college. Well, I mean, really in high school, I started doing yoga. I grew up dancing competitively, and then yoga was sort of my like transition out of dance. And I used to just do it like in my room with like doyogawithme.com. It was my, I was 15, 16, and it would just help me regulate anxiety. Started going to studios as I was like high school into college. In college, it really helped me with eating disorder recovery, living in a sorority house, and just being overstimulated all the time. I'm an extremely porous and sensitive person. So that definitely translated to my relationship, to where sometimes I didn't know where he ended and I began.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it felt like I just took in everything from him. If he was
Yeah.
even in the room, if he was even in the house, if he was in the town, I was waking up and thinking of him first. And so yoga therapy was like really a necessary part of my daily anxiety regulation. And I would say it's what helped me first tune into the sensations of my body. But that's not without saying that even though you do all this work to where you're tapping in, and you can be doing talk therapy and somatic therapy and journaling and all the
Mm-hmm.
things they tell you to do, you can still ignore your body. And I definitely feel like I pushed past my boundaries and pushed to the end of my rope, which I do not recommend. And I think in some ways there is still that like martyrdom voice that's like, well, we know we tried our absolute best because our body was at its wits' end.
Mm-hmm.
And I really saw the consequences of that after the separation and divorce in my own autoimmune diagnosis, my health, even my mental health, I think is still like recovering in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways.
And how has that shaped the work that you do? I know you're passionate about the mental health space, and how has that impacted what you want to do in the world?
Yeah. So lately I have been thinking about, what separation and divorce and really this like second lease on life gave me. And I think of this visual. So there's like the self, our true self, and that's like right here, right next to our chest. Intuition, heart, mind, and then there's like a thread. And on
Mm-hmm.
that other side of that thread is the version of us that is existing in the world, the version that's having to contort, to perform, to survive. And the practice is continually like rewinding that tether and coming as close as we can again to that true self. And that's really the work that I want to do and to help people within business context, but also I think our professional and personal lives are so intertwined. And so, how can we show up at work? How can we be leaders that are mindful, cognizant, gentle, productive in a way that moves society closer to themselves and each other in this time of isolation? I think that's more important than ever. And especially with the AI boom, I think sensitivity and humanity is going to become a luxury.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I think it's a theme that I've heard consistently from almost everybody that I've spoken with about their divorce experience. People are looking in their own authentic way to find how to channel that into serving the world, right? It's part of what I'm hoping to do with this podcast. And a lot of
Right.
people are doing it in their own unique way. I want to come back to some of the things that maybe you found supportive in addition to yoga therapy, as you mentioned, going through this at a relatively young age. Something that you and I connected with when we first met was just being relatively young when this happened to us, right? And many of our friends weren't yet married, let alone going through divorce experiences. Did you find supportive for you as you were going through the process, and how did you navigate that?
It's been about a year and a half. I'm just sort of coming out of that fog.
Mm-hmm.
And what was helpful was friends giving me the time and space to evolve differently. I was fortunate in that I had the opportunity to change cities, to start a brand new business school program, to form new friends who did not know my ex, did not know my past. And that was probably the most liberating thing that I could do at the time. It was a huge distraction, for better or worse. So, in some ways, it does feel like my grieving has been a bit drawn out because as my life has calmed down again, I'm confronted with all that it was that I left behind. But I have a few friendships from the time before separation and divorce that my relationship with them was very tied to my marriage, in that we were maybe close couple friends
Mm-hmm.
or childhood friends who knew him from childhood and knew me. And what was interesting that I observed is that your divorce is unfortunately sometimes not just about you and that person. Your family and friends that knew you at the time, they might sometimes, for about lack of a better word, but make it about themselves. And it's not like a blame or judgment. It's just that we are humans that identify with black and white and structure. And so when
Mm-hmm.
that gets shaken up, it's really unsettling for our nervous systems. So it's really comforting for people to know Elena with this person, she's going to
Yeah.
get married, she's going to have kids. And so what does it mean for them if this system that was so, set out is no longer that? I think that just that truth is unsettling for people. And so I had a couple relationships that just gave me the time and space to recreate myself, to reflect, to heal, to grieve. And like we've come back together in such a different way. And that's been beautiful. There were definitely some friendships that were laid to rest with the divorce. And I see now those as gifts, and the universe really just telling me like these are the people that are aligned with you now and moving forward, who you need, and those others taught you something in the past. But I think what was just most helpful was time and space. There were months that I didn't answer texts. And giving myself the permission to do that felt like the biggest act of radical love and self-preservation. I had never really been that protective over myself. It was always sort of like letting people determine what was good and bad, letting society or culture tell me what was good and what a good girl should do. And my family during that time gave me a ton of grace for my rebellious phases, for the times I just wanted to rage and rage in my own way. So, yeah, I really came back into my body, and then I had to realize what my new relationships would look like.
You said that you recreated yourself. So, who is the new Elena that's sitting in front of us today?
It's funny because I say like Elena 2.0, but then I'm like, it's kind of 3.0 now. 2.0 was like right after the divorce and separation. I moved to Oakland, California. So I was living in northern San Diego for a handful of years with my ex. Moved to Oakland. Oakland is this place that is like radically honest. If anyone who's been to Oakland knows that it's like a little bit rough around the edges, and like you have to be vigilant and all these things. It has a little bit of a bad rep, but it became such this place of like refuge and safety for me, and creativity and going outside of the norm and breaking fake rules. So it really felt like more aligned with my values and excitement for life. So the new me and business school, of course, gave me the time and space to be creative again. Being single for the first time gave me the time and space to be creative again. I came back to my writing practice, came back to my dancing practice. Being unapologetically selfish, I see now as a really healthy thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And as you think about looking ahead, so much life ahead of you, graduating from business school, moving on to career next steps, potentially dating and entering new relationships. How have your perspectives changed on life, on love, on identity? What's shifted for you?
First, in terms of life, I just remember there was like a repeating sentence in my brain as I was leaving. And that was like, that there has to be more to life than this for both him and I. We were both like in a really painful place and suffering. And I sort of was like, I really feel strongly that I was made for more and he was made for more. So I guess in terms of life, it's like you can start over anytime. And all it takes is truth and courage and the courage to tell the truth. In terms of love, I no longer see love as enough in partnership. I think partnership is love and marriage is love and partnership. You have to have this shared vision for what value you're going to bring to each other, how you're going to add to each other's lives. I now, when I'm dating, I notice when I'm grasping early on. And I see that now as like I'm looking for something in them that I'm looking for in myself. I'm looking for a life with them that I could potentially build myself or build closer to with myself. I think so often we seek relationship and seek co-regulation because we are scared to be alone. And society rewards you for being in a relationship. And I didn't realize that until after I got out of one. So we're no different, even though I'm in a relationship and it doesn't mean anything about your worth. But once I got out of relationship is when I saw it. And it's very hard to describe in society. It's this energetic thing where people just assume that there's something inherently right about you. And especially as women get older, that there could be something inherently wrong with you if you're not in a relationship. So I just want to challenge people on that. And yeah, I think I've learned a lot about dating and myself. I mean, I had never dated before, and so it was a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And genuinely, it's brought me so close with myself. I feel truly like my best friend. And there's still, I'm sure, many, many learnings to come, but it really feels like I'm on my own team for the first time in my life.
That's amazing. I'm so thrilled for you. And one thing that I think is just really remarkable is not only the healing that you've done and the amazing learning and perspectives that you've taken from this experience, but you still hold your ex in pretty high regard. You were even showing me a few mementos that you've kept from that relationship. Is there anything you want to share about that?
Yeah. I feel incredibly lucky. I experienced a love that I think some people don't ever experience in their lifetimes. I wouldn't be who I am today without him. It just, you have to reconcile. There can be love, and that isn't warrant to build a life together. Yeah, and I think divorce is particularly hard of the massive heartbreaks and breakups because you're doing this very logistic legal process as you're holding this tenderness of a life that you imagined together. I absolutely thought I would be like family planning by this point, and I can hold both grief and appreciation, but that's no longer my plan. It's weird. I think sometimes like it is like, is this a script that I'm telling myself that like, you know, it was a lovely time, now is different, but it feels real in my body. And that's even from the person that left. Like, I deeply miss him. When you have a friendship like that, It's very hard not to. But I feel convicted in that we're healthier on our own journeys. So I think divorce is sometimes it sounds weird, but choosing it is like in service of another and a greater good.
So, as we wrap up today's conversation, if there are other listeners who may be in a similar position as you were in, what do you hope sticks with them from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think that many of us walk through life voluntarily with blinders on, maybe waiting for others to wake us up, waiting for people to like shake us out of it or something, or to reveal the truth to us because it's too scary to face. I guess my hope for people and women, especially my age, who are unhappy in relationships is that you can know that you don't need like a nail in the coffin. You don't need this catastrophic event in your relationship. Like it's enough to be unhappy because life is so short to live a life and be in a partnership that is draining for either of you. People will say relationships are hard, and I heard that a lot, and I continued to like follow suit with that advice. But relationships are hard, but they shouldn't be that hard, and only what that looks like. And so my hope would be that folks learn to like first listen to yourself,
Yeah.
to get really quiet and listen, and then to begin trusting that voice, and then to have the courage to say it aloud and to do something about it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Elena, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for listening to The Details with Allison Kahler. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. New episodes drop every Tuesday.